This is Uganda TV. For you.
Hello, welcome to the next episode of The Seven Arrows of God here on Uganda TV channel. This is the story of Mugoya Michael, a pastor from Uganda. A man shot down several times but not killed. Let's go again.
When I was contemplating of going back to Kampala, and at one night, an overnight was taking place at a church called Christian Victory Church in Makambo, which was pastored by Pastor Andrew. I heard when one of the preachers was preaching in an overnight. For me, I was at home, and he said, "Tareye in the city." And previously, I had got a dream of which I was wondering the interpretation. Should I go back to Kampala or should I remain? However, the preacher said in the book of Luke chapter 24 verse 49 that tarry in the city until you are clothed with the power from above. The following day, I had to go and find out about that church. I found that it was locked, though when I looked through the window, the place had been with an inscription written at the pulpit, tarry in the city. So I tarried in the city. I introduced myself to Pastor Andrew, who welcomed me and told me, according to Romans chapter 8, from verse 37 up to 39, that nothing shall ever be able to separate us from the love of God. So I got a new home. As I was staying with Pastor Andrew, he was not a good terms with my sister, not a good terms with Betty, my friend's sister, and at the same time, I had been convicted by the Holy Spirit that I had to stay in that church. So I was found locked between the devil and the deep blue sea. I had to stay on with the church, follow the voice of God. And my sister wanted me to go and fellowship from the church of his pastor, God, right? When I disobeyed her, and then it became as if we were enemies living in the same house. And she was in debt because she was renting. At the same time, she was being demanded the money which she used to pay for my medical. And finally, when the landlady came to take over the house back, my sister ran away at night and left me behind. Fortunately, I had been in good terms with Betty, her friend, who had rented for me the next room. I stayed there for the next few months of fellowshipping at Pastor Andrew's place. And things were not working out for me because now my sister was seeing me as a traitor. At the same time, I had not been there standing for her, and yet she stood for me during the time when I was in need. And yet, I had disobeyed her, and I was fellowshipping at Pastor Andrew's place. I stayed on. Pastor Andrew stood with me, and he also planned with me, together with one of our landlady's half-son called Professor Jacob, who supported me financially and also supported me in the ways which were beyond I could ever pray of. Pastor Andrew helped me to get a job with the Boviravi CDC, where I was brought in as a cook under compassion. There I worked for a full year of contract while getting some kind of food, which was the biggest demand by that time because hunger was on me all the time. At CDC I worked for a full year and also got connected to Joshua Nation. Joshua Nation educated us in practical theology at a church called Apostolic Missionary Ministries, Boviravi, headed by Pastor Mike Wasiki. There we graduated, and during that time of study, I had linked up with the people like a pastor or prophetess Peace, who was impressed by me, and he said that she wanted me to join her ministry called Divine Prayer Ministries at Bugema. From Boviravi, I went to Bugema. Pastor Andrew never liked it, and he raised some dust saying that I have to stay with him. I said no, I have to go with Divine Prayer Ministries because they had promised me a radio program on Faith FM in Paris. During that time, that is 2022, 2023, I was now working on a radio station Faith FM with the Prophetess Peace in a program called God is Power, being promoted by my namesake Mugoya Klinike Yesu. Following a vicious cycle of scandals based on financial, and I had to move on. I linked up with a church called Echoes of Nazareth Ministries in Nkoma, headed by Apostle Fred, who welcomed me miraculous, and they said that he had snatched me from the devil's hands, from fire. The false prophet called Peace. I stayed with them. A woman called from that church, a church administrator called Winnie, welcomed me to her home, gave me a house, and provided him for all my needs. And I was growing healthy and healthier. However, they never gave me a position of being an administrator or a minister until I was just working as an usher or a caretaker. Finally, I found myself falling in love with one of the sisters in the church, whom at first I never knew that she was married. But after falling in love with her, that's when I realized that her husband had just moved on and came back complaining that I was in love, and indeed I was. We tried to keep it secret, but it never worked. Until finally the church excommunicated me because I had got an opportunity to start broadcasting online as I used to do with ITV Uganda, which I had rebranded to Uganda TV. And now the senior pastor wasn't impressed by that, so he chose to excommunicate me publicly. The 6th arrow struck my spirit. I had to move on with another man from that church called Badru, who saw my media ministry as something good for the revival in Uganda. According to all people who seen the spirit, we are pointing at that Mbari is the home of revival. I joined up with one of my young uncles called Mumbia, who had started a small church called Life of Christ Church, but he was administering it according to the Catholic way. And I said, this is not my way. So anyway, in Busamaga there was a church called New Favor Ministries. And I liked that place because it was nearby. However, I had to move on up to a church called City Victory Church, who welcomed me in Change Makers class, and in Change Makers class I was a translator of Bishop Wandela. On top of that, I was helping in the media ministry, which was my love. I enjoyed the place. It was so cool. The people were welcoming, and the mission was to love God most and to love people well. I liked the place. The members were good. They were like those ones of Watoto. But where I was staying, because I had been excommunicated from Echoes of Nazareth, I was not living a good life. I was a hawker in Mbale, a hawker of onions, and I could walk from morning up to evening to get just a profit of 1,500 shillings for me to eat my supper. I had to think twice because the things were not working out again. So I had to think twice. I deceived my uncle I was staying with in Busamaga that I had got a job in Kampala with the intelligence sector, and I had to say goodbye to my lover, whom was still in love with me despite being excommunicated from Echoes of Nazareth. I said goodbye to the church I was fellowshipping with, that is City Victory Church in Mbale City, and early morning I packed all my books, my Bibles and my clothes, and someone from Buganda, a friend called Wilson, had sent me transport. So early morning I ran away from Mbale City, going back to Buganda, Buikwe, the village where I grew up from. As soon as I had landed out of the car, I remembered that I had left my bag inside the taxi, and it went away with all my documents, all my books, and the Bible.
Wow, that's it for today. Watch out again for the next episode. Remember, this one was proudly brought to you by New Revival Nursery and Primary School in Buikwe and Uganda TV. Together, let's support the education of underprivileged children in Uganda. Carolina, I say goodbye for now.
This is Uganda TV for you.